What if placebo isn't deception, but permission? Not a trick, but the moment you stop waiting for evidence and start allowing experience. Not, maybe this will work, but maybe I'm finally ready to see. Nothing changes until you do. You think you're observing the world, but what if you're only ever observing your own belief, reflected back at you? The miracle isn't out there. It's in what you're willing to notice. Two people can stand in the same room. One sees failure, the other opportunity. One sees dust, the other sees sacred ground. Same reality, different permission. What you believe becomes what you're able to see. Jung once wrote, "Your vision will become clear only when you look into your heart. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." We don't change the world by force. We change it by shifting the lens. And sometimes all it takes is a symbol, a gesture, a word, a moment of quiet trust to unlock a new way of seeing. That's the true placebo. Not a pill, not a lie, but a signal sent inward that says you may proceed. Placebo is not fake help. It's real access to what was already waiting in you. Think of all the stories across history. A child touches a relic and believes they are safe. A dancer ties a ribbon and believes they cannot fail. A warrior speaks a name and feels protected. What changed? Not the world. The meaning, the permission. You don't need to understand it logically. You just need to feel the inner door unclick. What if you've already crossed the threshold, but haven't realized you're on the other side? Placebo is a rehearsal. For the real, it's your psyche saying, let's pretend until we remember. And when belief settles in, not as a theory, but as presence, everything changes. Not outside, inside. Because reality isn't what happens. It's what happens to you once you accepted that it could. You are not here to be convinced. You are here to remember. So the question isn't whether placebo works. The question is, were you ready to let be true? You've been taught to trust what you can prove, to name it, measure it, repeat it. You've been told. Reality doesn't care what you believe. But here's the catch. Belief is the lens that makes reality visible. The myth of objectivity is the most convincing illusion of all. They called it science, logic, common sense. But what they didn't tell you is that even facts need a witness, and the witness is never neutral. You don't just observe the world. You participate in its unfolding. Your gaze isn't passive. It's creative. Attention is not observation. It's authorship. How many things have you missed because you didn't believe they were possible? How many moments of softness, freedom, synchronicity passed through your life like strangers because the part of you that could recognize them was still asleep? You were taught to doubt magic, to mistrust the unexplained, to shrink your experience until it fit within someone else's language. Wonder became childish. Certainty became adult. But something in you remembered, didn't it? The way music opens doorways, the way a stranger's eyes feel like a message, the way you knew something before it happened and didn't dare speak it aloud. That's not fantasy. That's your original literacy, the one the rational world made you forget. You didn't stop believing. You started apologizing for it. They told you to ask for permission, to wait for proof, to silence your intuition until it had a citation. But here's what Jung knew. The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely, because to accept yourself fully is to stop outsourcing reality to experts, studies, systems. It's to reclaim your vision as legitimate, your experience as valid. What if your perception isn't flawed, but sacred? That's why the placebo works. Not because it tricks the body, but because it honors the soul's authority. It whispers. You don't need external confirmation to begin the shift. You don't need a priest. To sanctify your longing, you don't need a study. To justify your feeling, you don't need a map. To walk a path that's already opening inside you. Some truths aren't provable, but they're livable. This is not about rejecting science. It's about remembering. Science is just another language, and it isn't the only one. Intuition, myth, symbol, synchronicity. They are not less true. They are just less measured, and sometimes more alive. The world you live in responds to the world you believe in. So the spell isn't reality itself. It's the idea that it's objective, that it exists without you, that it isn't being shaped by every breath you take. You don't need a pill. You need permission. You were raised in a world where the microscope replaced the mirror, where the only truths worth speaking were the ones you could print, publish, or scan. But what about the moment you walked into a room and knew something was wrong before a word was spoken? What about the dreams that whispered answers you hadn't dared to ask? What about the silence that sometimes feels more honest than all the facts combined? The rational world calls these anomalies. You call them home. Some truths don't need proof. They need recognition. Because somewhere deep in your body, you already know the external world is not the master. It's the echo, and your belief is the original voice. So what is placebo really? Not a sugar pill, not a false hope, but a signal to your unconscious that says, you are now allowed to live as if it's already true. It doesn't manipulate the system. It reprograms a permission, not to invent, but to reveal what was always possible. When you stop needing someone else to prove it, Jung didn't reject the real. He expanded it. He said, the psyche is real. It has its own reality, and that reality is not less, but more than physical reality. What if the most powerful shift is the one that happens entirely within? So maybe the placebo is not second best. Maybe it's the original doorway, not the imposter, but the invitation to step out of the consensus trance, to leave behind the idea that reality is fixed, cold, and waiting for your compliance, and to begin something far more terrifying and far more honest, to trust what you see. When no one else has seen it yet, you don't see the world. You see what you've been trained to believe is there. And belief doesn't whisper. It frames. It selects. It edits reality in real time. You walk through a crowd and notice rejection because somewhere inside, you've already decided you don't belong. You hear silence and assume it means judgment because somewhere in your past, you learn to fear the quiet. You call it the truth, but it's just what your belief lets through. Carl Jung called this the mirror of the psyche, and he warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The placebo works, not because it changes reality, but because it gives you permission to expect something different, and expectation is the first brushstroke in the painting of your world. You're not just living in an objective landscape. You're living in a projection built from unspoken convictions about who you are, what you deserve, what's possible. The persona is one such belief, a curated self, a way of saying, this version of me is safe to show. It's not false, it's strategic, but over time, you forget it's a choice and mistake it for identity. You start believing the mask more than the face beneath it, and what you believe, you start to see. You don't wear the mask begins to wear you. But what about the parts you've hidden? The rage you were told was dangerous, the softness you learned to protect, the questions you weren't allowed to ask. These don't disappear. They become your shadow, a repository of forbidden beliefs, not about the world, but about yourself. You don't see them, but they see you, and they shape what the mirror reflects. The shadow doesn't just sit in the dark. It reaches outward. It starts coloring the world. In the very tones you refuse to hold inside, you see arrogance in others, but it's your repressed confidence. You see betrayal, but it's your own fear of trusting. You see manipulation, but it's your own hidden hunger for control. This is what Jung called projection, when the unconscious belief becomes external fact. And here's where the placebo lives, not in the substance, but in the pattern recognition of the psyche trying to validate what it already fears or already hopes. You don't attract what you want. You attract what you're braced for. You think you're reacting to life, but you're reacting to what you place there. Placebo is not about being fooled. It's about realizing that your mind already preloaded the simulation long before you press play. So when something shifts, not outside, but within, you suddenly see everything differently. The same room, the same people, but now a different belief is running the mirror. You once believed you were unsafe and saw a threat everywhere. Now you believe you are growing, and even resistance looks like feedback. When you change what you believe, you change what the mirror reflects. That's why some people heal. From rituals others mock, why one word, spoken at the right time, can undo years of silence. Why a symbol, a gesture, a shift in posture can remake your entire sense of what's real. It's not magic, it's recognition. Your psyche isn't asking for a new world. It's asking for a new lens. And placebo is the moment you try one on, not to pretend, but to remember that what you perceive was always up to you. So ask yourself, what if nothing around you changed, but everything inside you did? What if you're not waiting for signs, but authoring them? What if reality is not a rule, but a reflection? It starts subtly. You feel tired, but sleep doesn't help. You rest, but you never fully return. You show up, you smile, you function, but inside, you're flickering, unstable, a signal glitching between timelines. Your thoughts speed up, your breath shortens. The room is quiet, but your body isn't. When the old self begins to die, the nervous system notices first. You try harder. You double down on routines. You reach for logic, structure, explanation, but they don't hold. They don't soothe. They don't touch what's happening, because what's breaking down is not just a system. It's your reflection in it. You can't think your way back to a version of reality that no longer believes in you. So you freeze, or you run, or you spiral. You Google symptoms. You meditate aggressively. You look for answers in books, in podcasts, in other people's calm. You're not looking for a cure. You're looking for permission to stop pretending. Because somewhere deep in your body, something's whispering, this isn't working. This isn't real. This isn't you. But you override it because the consequences feel too big. Who are you, if not the version that tried so hard? What happens if you stop holding up the mask everyone got so used to? What breaks if you step out of the mirror you built your life around? At first, it feels like failure, like you're falling apart, like you're losing grip on the life you worked so hard to hold together. But look closer. You're not breaking down. You're breaking out of a role, out of a belief, out of an inherited idea of who you were supposed to be. Reality didn't collapse. Your compliance with it did. It can come suddenly. A sentence, a sound, a smell from childhood. That reminds you who you were before performance replaced presence. Someone says, you don't have to do this anymore. And your breath catches, not because you believe them, but because something inside you already did. That's the moment, the placebo moment. Not a miracle, not a fix, just a flicker of something softer, something true. The voice you stop listening to turns the volume up. And this time, you don't shut it down. You pause. You let the unfamiliar settle in your chest. You stop reaching for explanation and simply allow what you never dared believe before. Maybe this isn't a breakdown. Maybe it's a re-entry. When you stop trying to return to normal, You discover who you were before you forgot. That's when the room feels different. Not brighter, not easier, but realer. You sit, you don't escape. And for the first time, your body doesn't fight it because it finally received the message you spent years avoiding. It's safe now. You don't have to be that person anymore. And just like that, the war ends. Not outside, inside, not with a victory, but with surrender. Not to fear, but to possibility. You don't announce it. You don't post about it. You don't even fully understand it. You just wake up one day, and something is softer. The tension isn't gone, but it's not in charge anymore. You didn't change your life. You changed what you allowed to be true. That's the power of permission. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. It whispers. You're allowed to live differently now. And your nervous system, tired of defending the old self, exhales in relief. You move slower, not because you're lazy, but because you stop sprinting away from yourself. You say no, not to rebel, but because yes is sacred now. You're no longer convincing yourself. You're becoming yourself. That's the real placebo. Not belief in something external, but a shift so deep inside that the world has no choice but to follow your new outline. You don't need to prove it. You don't need to explain it. You don't need applause. You just begin as if you were never broken, as if the next version of you had been waiting, not for healing, but for invitation. And when you walk into the room now, you're not looking for reflection. You are the reflection, not the echo of old beliefs, but the presence of a new one. I trust what I feel. I trust who I'm becoming. This isn't recovery. It's a return. You eat slower, breathe deeper, love quieter. Your boundaries stop feeling like walls and start feeling like skin. You're no longer editing yourself to fit the mirror. You're building a life that matches your internal knowing. And for the first time, your body agrees. No more resistance, no more splitting, just coherence. You're living as if the change has already happened, and that's why it has. And you? Have you given yourself permission to soften, to shift, to stop waiting for signs, and become the sign? If this feels like truth to you, you're already in the process. You've already crossed the line. You've already whispered yes. There's a strange quiet after the change. No celebration, no fanfare, just absence. The noise you once lived inside no longer finds you. The chaos you once called connection starts to feel like static. And you don't know who to be without the roles you used to perform. This is not loneliness. This is decompression. Old conversations don't land the same. Old faces feel distant, not wrong, just not part of the new frequency. You're not hiding, you're not running, but you are disappearing from the places that demanded your survival. Instead of your truth, you wonder if it's okay to not miss what you let go of. You wonder if peace can feel this unfamiliar. You used to crave intensity. Now you crave clarity. You used to call attention love. Now you want presence. You're no longer available for what made you abandon yourself. You sit in silence and realize it's not empty. It's sacred. You feel your breath, and it doesn't apologize. You speak less often, but more truthfully. And you wait, not for answers, but for resonance. Because you're no longer building a self. You're remembering one. You don't go back. There's no reset, no way to unknow what you've seen. You move forward, not as someone new, but as someone integrated. You stop performing insight and start embodying it. No more quotes to cling to, no more mantras to force. Just one quiet knowing. I have returned to myself. This is what real change looks like. Invisible on the outside, irreversible within. And now, a gesture, a symbol, not from a textbook, but from your own body. You place your hand on your chest and feel presence. You light a candle, not for ritual, but as recognition. I am here. You no longer seek meaning. You carry it. You no longer chase signs. You become one. Carl Jung once wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And now you understand. Placebo was never about belief in the false. It was belief made active, made symbolic, made real, a mirror held up to your soul, asking, what if it's true now? And you answered, not with proof, but with presence. So you walk, not faster, but deeper, not toward a goal, but through a threshold, and the world begins to respond, not because it changed, but because you did. You don't invent the sacred. You remember it, and live it, and let it speak through you. And maybe that's the real miracle, that the whole time you were waiting for a cure, it was waiting for your permission to begin.